Go ahead. Yep.
My name is Patrick Kelly. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the St. Lawrence County Industrial Development Agency. I am calling this public hearing to order for our contemplated projects with Air Products and Chemicals. Air Products and Chemicals, Inc. has submitted an application to the agency, a copy of which is available today at that table, and has been posted to our website and will continue to be on file at the office of the agency upon request. The application requests that the agency consider undertaking a project, hereafter the project, for the benefit of the company. The project consists of A, the acquisition of a leasehold interest in approximately 88.5 acres of land located on Pontoon Bridge Road in the town of Messina, St. Lawrence County, New York State. The construction on the land of an approximately 88.5 acre green hydrogen facility to harvest up to 35 metric tons per day of green hydrogen, utilizing renewable power to be supplied by the New York Power Authority, consisting of an electrolyzer building, a compressor building, a water treatment building, a control building, a terminal building, and an electrical substation with associated parking areas, access roads, emergency generators and pads, all necessary utilities, stormwater basin, security fencing, and any other required improvements, hereinafter improvements. And the acquisition and installation therein and thereon of related fixtures, machinery, equipment, and other tangible personal property, collectively the equipment. And together with the land and improvements, the facility, and the sublease of the agency's interest in the facility back to the company pursuant to a leaseback agreement. All of the foregoing, the company will own a fee interest in the facility and the agency will acquire a leasehold interest in the facility. The financial assistance contemplated by the agency will consist generally of the exemption from taxation expected to be claimed by the company as a result of the agency taking an interest in, possession or control by lease, license, or otherwise of the facility and or the company acting as an agent of the agency. The agency is considering whether to undertake the project and to provide an exemption from taxation, which may include an exemption from New York State and local sales and use tax with respect to construction, installation, and equipping of the facility, and an exemption from general real property taxation with respect to the facility, which exemption shall be offset in whole or in part by contractual payments in lieu of taxes, otherwise known as a pilot, by the company for the benefit of the affected taxing jurisdictions. The agency has not yet made a determination pursuant to Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, the Secret Act, regarding the potential environmental impact of the project. This will be addressed at the next board meeting of the agency. At this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Trip Oliver, Director of Government Relations for Air Products. He's going to give us some summary information about the company and the project.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. Thank you all for coming today. We're extremely excited about this project at Air Products. Air Products is the world's leading industrial gas company. We've been in business for around 83 years. We were founded in Detroit, Michigan, and are currently headquartered in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We have about 20,000 employees worldwide. And we are the largest producer of hydrogen in the world and have been producing hydrogen now for over 60 years. This project we're extremely excited about. As Pat mentioned, we're going to be building a 35 metric ton hydrogen production facility, a green hydrogen production facility, right up the street on Pontoon Bridge Road, Outer North Main Street here in Messina. What makes it a green hydrogen facility is that the hydrogen will be produced with no carbon emissions. So we will be running the facility with hydropower from the St. Lawrence River. The hydrogen will be produced through a process called water electrolysis. So we will take water, we will run an electric current through the water, and that electric current will break the water into its component parts. As we all know, water is H2O. H2 is hydrogen. O is oxygen, so it'll separate the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then the oxygen will be the only emission from this process. So oxygen will be vented to the atmosphere. And the hydrogen will then go through what's called a liquefaction process. That cools the hydrogen to something like 423 negative degrees Fahrenheit. Which will then turn it into a liquid. It will then be stored in tanks and then loaded onto liquid hydrogen trailers to be distributed throughout the region to our customers. The water that we are getting was from the St. Lawrence River. We have a contract with the Village of Messina Water Department. We'll be buying about $300,000 worth of water a year from the Village of Messina Water Department. And so we will use the process with this site. We'll use approximately 1 to 1.2 million gallons of water a day. Of that water, about 300,000 or so will be then returned to the St. Lawrence River, actually cleaner than it was when it came out. The water is used for two different things. Number one, as I mentioned, is the water electrolysis. So the water will be converted into hydrogen and oxygen. So that water doesn't get returned to the river because it's no longer water. The other use we have for the water is cooling throughout the process. So it's cooling water that runs throughout the system and makes sure that our process is cool. It gets returned to the river, and as I said, will be cleaner than the water that came out of the river. The improvements on site, as Pat mentioned, there are about 4 buildings. This is the terminal building, which he mentioned. That's where the trucks get maintained and serviced and cleaned. This is the operations building. This is where most of the employees will be located. This will where the facility will be run out of. It's this building right here. This is the water treatment building, where the water we get from the St. Lawrence River goes in here. We purify that water before it goes through the electrolysis process. This building here is the electrolyzer building. That's where the electrolysis process occurs. And when that process occurs, it converts the water into hydrogen gas and oxygen. The oxygen, as I mentioned, gets vented into the atmosphere. The hydrogen gas goes along these pipes right here to this building, which is the liquefaction building, the compressor building, as Pat mentioned. That's what turns it into a liquid hydrogen as opposed to a gaseous hydrogen. Again, then it gets stored in these tanks right here. And then trucks come in here and load up and depart from the site to deliver liquid hydrogen to customers throughout the region. Just so you know, when the trucks come and go from our site, they will all be coming from 131 up here, down Pontoon Bridge Road, into our site, picking up, going out, taking a right, and going out Pontoon Bridge Road 131, and then 131 to 37. No trucks will be going through the Village of Messina, either coming to or from the site. As far as the timing of this, so we actually just drove by the site today, and it appears as if site clearing is just getting underway. There's some equipment on site right now. Site clearing will occur over the next couple of months. There's some limitations on how much site clearing we can do at this point because we're still waiting for an Army Corps wetlands determination that we should hopefully receive in the next month or so. Construction on this project will take about 3 years. So the actual facility that you see here will be operational in all likelihood end of 26, beginning of 2027. So the product that we're going to be creating here, we're going to use for a couple of purposes. Usually, primarily, it's going to be into the mobility market. So we believe that there are a lot of vehicles that could benefit from the use of hydrogen as opposed to diesel fuel. So you guys are familiar with Teslas and all that, your battery electric cars. We think that battery electric vehicles are appropriate for passenger vehicles, light duty vehicles. We do not believe battery electric vehicles are appropriate for heavy duty vehicles. I don't think they perform as well, they don't last as long, and they don't have the duration that are needed for long haul vehicles. So what we are looking to do is utilize the hydrogen for hydrogen fuel cell trucks, long haul trucks, buses, fleet vehicles, ports, that sort of thing to reduce the carbon intensity of their operations, throughout this region. The other thing that we're looking at is industrial applications. So there are a lot of industrial processes that utilize carbon in their process, and they emit carbon. So to reduce the carbon intensity of those industrial processes, we will look for them to convert to hydrogen in order to power and fuel their processes and reduce their carbon emissions. So what this facility will do is really support New York's climate goals and their energy transition. And this facility alone has the potential, if all of this fuel, for instance, was used to fuel heavy duty trucks, it would reduce by about 6 million tons of CO2 over the life of the project. And it would replace about 600 million gallons of diesel fuel over the life of the project. And so that would be the environmental benefits of this facility. As far as the benefits to the community, this project will bring 90 jobs. And those jobs there will be about 64 jobs likely at the facility itself. And another 26 jobs that will be in either an office location somewhere in this area or at the site. We're still determining that at this point in time. Over the course of the 3-year construction period that I mentioned, there will be about 500,000 hours of construction work to be done. At peak construction, it will be roughly 350 people on site. So as I mentioned, site clearing is going to be starting now and will take a little bit of time. That 20, 30, 40 jobs during site clearing. Next year, I think we're going to ramp up to maybe 100, 125 jobs on site. And then in 2025, that's when you're going to get to peak construction at about roughly 350 jobs on site. Spend in the community maintenance, annual maintenance costs of this facility are about $2 million a year. So we will be obviously utilizing, contractors in the community to help with maintenance at about $2 million a year. Every few years, we have to do a major turnaround. That's an additional $5 million a year to spend. As I mentioned, we're going to be spending about $300,000 a year purchasing water from the village of Messina. And then this pilot agreement that Patrick just mentioned would result in millions of dollars in additional tax revenues or revenues for the local taxing jurisdictions over and above what they're currently receiving for this property. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Patrick. We're happy to answer any questions. Just so you know, I have with me Fred Schneider, who's the North Region Line Manager for Air Products. Fred is overseeing the part of the business that would be responsible for this facility. And then Harry Johnston is the Senior Business Development Manager for Air Products, and he's really in charge of deciding where we're going to put these types of facilities and who our customers are going to be.
Thank you very much, Fred. With that, I will now open the floor to any members of the public who wish to make a comment.
So I just, sorry.
Just identify yourself by name so we can have a record of who spoke.
Certainly, Jim Heidi, resident of Messina, just to get a clarity of what hydrogen does and who your market is. If you could tell us a little bit of that.
Sure. So as Tripp said, Harry Johnson, commercial director. We're at the end of the day, there are a lot of companies that use liquid hydrogen today. That liquid hydrogen is all produced from natural gas. When you produce that hydrogen, the carbon from the natural gas ends up as CO2, gets vented. There are a lot of efforts underway regionally for all companies and municipalities to lower their carbon emissions. Transportation is a big piece of this. So the vast majority of the product from this plant we see going into what we call the mobility market. It's for trucks, buses, vehicles, not cars, but for mobility. So it's to move things around. It's whether it's from, again, heavy duty or buses or fleets of vehicles. A lot of the municipalities within the state of New York are being motivated by state laws that are in effect now and will be in effect by the time this plant comes on to decarbonize. And that's going to motivate them to use liquid hydrogen as a means to decarbonize.
Just a follow on to that, Phil Fiacco, resident of Messina. Do you produce hydrogen in this way in other plants?
Not yet. This will be one of the first plants, using electrolysis that we will have coming on stream. As Trip mentioned, we are the world's largest producer of hydrogen. All that hydrogen comes today from some type of carbon source, whether it's natural gas or coal or other organic sources. But using electrolysis, we have this facility that's going in here. We have a very large facility in Texas that we're building right now. We have a very large facility in Saudi Arabia that we're building right now. And a number of other facilities in Canada and US that we're contemplating to do basically the same thing we're doing here. So this will be our first, one of our first. One company.
If I could just add to that, as well, Harry, I think it's also important to point out that, in this process, a lot of this equipment and the technology already exists, right? So we manufacture hydrogen, as Harry said, on large scale globally. We liquefy hydrogen, we transport it by truck. Really, it's just how do you make the molecule piece of this that's different, right? So the electrolyzer separated water to make hydrogen versus cracking natural gas is a distinguishing difference between how we've made hydrogen historically versus how we'll make hydrogen at Messina here. So I think it's important to understand that while this is new technology in terms of electrolyzers, it's really something we're very comfortable doing, right? We've worked in this space for 60 years. Manufacturing.
And the companies that are making the electrolyzers themselves have been doing that for many years. So it's the first time we brought those pieces together at scale.
So if I might again. We used to be the jewel of the North Country with the industries we used to have. And Pat, all of us in here, we felt the pains of NAFTA and all that good stuff. Are there any spin-off companies that could take advantage of your facility up here? That could locate also in Messina? For good example, we had one of the largest aluminum foundries or smelters in the country, in the world probably. Everybody uses aluminum. And they make a widget out of anything aluminum. We didn't take advantage of them being here. This is a great shot in the arm for the community. Is there any spin-off companies that could piggyback on top of you folks down the road?
So the short answer is yes. I don't know if you've had any conversations with anybody in particular, but when we are building our facilities, as I mentioned, different parts of the country, we have been approached by different companies to say, you're gonna be making all this low carbon hydrogen. Is there a way we can work together to reduce transportation costs? At some of our facilities, for example, rather than liquefy it for transportation via our trucks, we're talking to some companies about just taking the gaseous hydrogen and providing it to them for their use. If we don't have to liquefy it, then the cost comes down, the cost of production comes down. I'm not aware of any immediate synergies that are being worked on right now, but the concept is absolutely true, that if a company needed gaseous or liquid hydrogen, they would save some money by co-locating here and benefit from it.
Thank you.
Just a comment, I'm Scott Hilliard with the Laborers Union, and I just want to thank Air Products in their commitment to utilize the North Country building trades to build this facility. We're grateful and we're ready to work on it.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you.
Any other? We're trying to get Jim out of his shell, so. Go ahead.
Don't put a microphone in front of my face. But it's just, how about the environmental impacts? Have we cleared all the agencies? I mean, up here, the spotted snail has more rights than all of us. And have we cleared all that good stuff to hopefully go forward without any glitching?
So we don't have, I don't think we have any of our environmental experts.
Yeah, I'll try to do some of that. So, just so you know, back in, I want to say May, the planning board of Messina, acting as the lead agency in the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act process, determined that this project will have little environmental impact, and thus they issued what's called a negative declaration, which means they don't have to do an environmental impact assessment because this project has little to no environmental impact. As I mentioned before, the air emissions are oxygen. That's it. The only other air emission would be obviously the trucks, at least in the short term, are diesel. So that would have some air emissions. And if for some reason the power went out and we had to go to the generator, that's diesel. So that would have some air emissions, but very de minimis. And as far as the trucks are concerned, you know, our company is planning in the next several years, let's say, to convert our entire fleet of vehicles to hydrogen fuel cell, in which case then the trucks would have no emissions either. The water that we are discharging, as I mentioned, is basically cooling water that will actually be cleaned up before it gets put into the river, and it'll be much cleaner than the water that was already, that we withdrew from the river. So, as far as environmental impacts, they're very few.
Well, what you mentioned, it's just all parts of doing business. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, you know, but it's just so happened, you know, that, you know, whenever a good idea comes up, it's always these alphabet agencies that come in and,
Yeah. And so yes, we have to go through a lot of permitting. As I mentioned, we're gonna be discharging the water into the Power Canal. That requires what's called a wastewater discharge permit from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. We're still going through that process. They haven't actually issued the permit yet, but we don't anticipate any issues with that. I mentioned earlier that, we're still waiting on wetland determinations. There's a bit of a jurisdictional issue as to who is going to be the agency that makes that determination. It was previously going to be the Army Corps. There was actually a Supreme Court ruling recently that will result in that determination being made by the DEC. The Army Corps has to send a letter to the DEC, basically granting them authority to make that wetland determination. So it's just a matter of time. We've actually had preliminary conversations with the DEC. We don't really see any issues with wetland determinations, so.
All right, Bob, are there any comments with Zoom participants?
No,
how many are on, Bob?
3.
The other thing I wanted to mention, for those of you that are interested, is we have a lot of documents up on the website. And that website is www.cscos.com/Messina-green-hydrogen-facility/. I will give you guys this if you want it, so it has the website on it. But on that website, we have a frequently asked questions document that's got about 20 questions and answers. Many of those are environmental related questions, and so I have some copies of that too, if you would like.
Last call for comments.
Yeah, Hassan Fayad, here in Messina as well. So you spoke a little bit about the water, the purchase of water through the Village of Messina. What about the sanitary? Although it's gonna be minimal, I guess, are you gonna have on-site sanitary? And then another question is this plant able to be expanded in the future, provided its success? Can you expand on that?
So yes, it can be expanded. And that will be determined by the market.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, how you know, demand for the hydrogen, that's gonna be a determination as to any kind of future expansion. As far as the sewer, it will be a septic system, so.
Sanitary.
Yeah.
How did you come about Messina?
There are a number of factors involved. One of the biggest factors is the availability of green power. So you can't produce green hydrogen without green power. And the hydropower from the St. Lawrence River was a big piece of that. You know, I think that we also believe that the workforce in this region is
a good workforce that will help, that will be, capable of performing the jobs we need both in the construction phase and over the long term. And so that was another reason for the location. And then it's reasonably close to the Northeast regional markets that we would use to deliver our product to customers.
And nothing by rail, it's all truck?
All truck.
Pat Casey, Messina resident. It looks like the cooling process that you have is pretty energy intensive. Is that taken care of with the hydrogen that you're producing?
Let me turn over to Fred, and Fred will answer those questions.
Yeah, so the cooling process is, obviously more complicated, but not all that different from a standard air conditioning system, right? So you compress, you cool, expand, and that's how you generate refrigeration. So in the case of our process here, we're doing the same thing, albeit on a much larger scale. So yes, really the cost of refrigeration is electricity. So part of the power allocation for here is going to the electrolyzers to actually drive the electrical current through the water, make the molecules of hydrogen. And then another component of the power is going to the refrigeration cycle, where we power compressors and equipment to compress, cool, expand. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Some really good questions. I appreciate everyone's time coming out and sharing your questions and comments. With that, hearing no other comments, I will declare the public hearing closed.
Build it.